Banking sector is on a digital transformation overdrive, and Deloitte's latest digital banking maturity report just puts a stamp on it. 9 Indian banks have been ranked as digital champions, outperforming global peers in critical customer journeys. To dive into the findings and decode what lies ahead, I am joined by Vijay Mani and Suchintan Chatterjee from Deloitte. Welcome, gentlemen, to this special discussion. First, I would want to come to you, Vijay, to understand that what does this report signify, because we have seen that DBM index Indian banks has jumped from 43% to 59% in 2 years. What does this improvement actually signify in terms of digital evolution and customer experience maturity?
Thank you, Ankur, for having us. So the increase in the score essentially signifies a significant improvement in maturity in essentially two areas. One is day-to-day banking, and the other is expanding the relationship. In fact, of the 16 percentage point increase, 10 percentage point was an improvement in maturity of day-to-day banking journeys. And these are journeys such as making payments, managing your card, managing your account, basic things, right? And these have significantly become easier, particularly when you look at the global banks. The other area where Indian banks have really done well, this accounts for 3% out of the 16%, is expanding the relationship. And this is, cross-selling, upselling, those kind of things. But I would add that this also signifies that given that the average score of Indian banks is still just 59%, and even for the digital champions, it's only 64%, there is still a significant headroom for improvement in maturity, even though we are in a leadership position.
Right. Suchintan, 9 Indian banks have made it to digital champion list globally. What are the common traits or strategies that help them to stand out?
So I think, and Suchintan, please feel free to add. I think a few things, a few areas where Indian banks have always been very strong. Right? So customer onboarding and account opening, Indian banks have always had a very strong offering compared to global banks. These journeys have been largely digitized. And I think even in areas such as information gathering, educating customers about the offerings of the banks, Indian banks have had a very strong position. And then building upon that, they have really improved on day-to-day banking and cross-selling. I think the areas where more work needs to be done are essentially customer support, personal financial management, and more personalization of products and services.
Yeah, and just to add to what Vijay already said, Ankur, I think the other thing that's helping Indian banks leapfrog their peers in other markets is actually embedding them where the customer is, right? So let me explain what I mean by that. It's not like always you have to come to the bank's mobile app or the website to discover what the bank's products and services are. Banks are doing a great job in being where their customers are, whether these are marketplaces out there, whether these are e-commerce sites, or when you are booking a cab. I think that's the fundamental shift that we are seeing when it comes to retail digital banking in India.
Right. If you talk specifically, you have highlighted India outperforming global peers across multiple journey steps. Which digital journey stages are the strongest for Indian banks, and where is there still ground to cover? What is your view, Suchintan, on that?
Sure. So like Vijay alluded to, right, I think Indian banks have scored very strongly when it comes to onboarding of customers, right? And we are seeing banks taking a tremendous advantage of the digital public infrastructure that's been set up, whether it is about validating the identity of the customer, whatever it takes to take advantage of the third-party ecosystem to make the journey a lot more seamless. And that's where Indian banks have, if I may use the term, an unfair advantage because of the rails that have been set up in the ecosystem, right? So that's clearly one area where Indian banks are outperforming traditional banks or even banks in the emerging markets or rather more matured markets. The other area that the Indian banks have innovated over the past couple of years since the last version of the study came out is actually making the products and the proposition more relevant for the digital banking channel, which I referred to personal finance management. We're seeing a lot of awareness increasing for customers when it comes to moving beyond the traditional banking products, moving into the financial market. So that's also another trend that is clearly coming out in this year's report.
Right. Vijay, the report also mentions customer onboarding and day-to-day banking as high-performing areas. Could you share how banks are redesigning these journeys to enhance user satisfaction?
Yeah, maybe I'll give you an example, right? I'll take a particular product and Vijay, feel free to add in, right? This study focuses primarily on the retail customer segment. So if you look at home loan as a journey, right, or a product, now typically home loan has been a very paper intensive journey. It still is to a large extent. You need a lot of documentation, papers to be submitted by the customer, to be validated, rechecked by the banks. But to a large extent, it is possible to digitize a large part of the journey, which was unthinkable maybe 2 or 3 years back, right? And in there, banks are taking advantage of developments outside the banking sector, whether it is about digitizing some of the records, right? Digitizing ownership of land records. These are actually helping much beyond even the metro markets, right? When you are looking at the tier 2, tier 3 cities, even in the rural markets, when it comes to underwriting property papers, we are seeing a lot of digitization happening. So that's one example, Ankur, that I think of quoting.
Vijay, what is your view?
Yeah, and I think a couple of other areas that I'll highlight is that payments has always been a strong area for Indian banks. Given our UPI infrastructure, which is not just the world's largest real-time payment system, it's arguably the best real-time payment system in the world, right, in terms of experience. And Indian banks have really done well to provide that service to Indian customers, and that has contributed significantly to the maturity and the higher scores. Right? Also, Indian banks have done well to make use of newer channels such as instant messaging based channel to offer more timely service and better service to their customers, right, compared to global banks.
That leads to me for the next question. Personal finance management and hyper-personalized support through conversational solutions are cited as areas of improvement. What are the key gaps and how can actually banks close them if both of you can answer one by one?
Sure. I think, there are some very basic aspects to personal financial management. For instance, categorization of spends, setting of budgets, monitoring of budgets. These are not so much a challenge from an app functionality point of view, but from a data point of view, they can be challenging because merchant identification becomes a challenge if the data doesn't come through to a bank and it's unable to represent the category of the merchant accurately in the mobile banking app. Right? So there are some challenges there. It's an ecosystem challenge, not a challenge with individual banks. But that really becomes a big area of opportunity for Indian banks as a whole to offer better views when it comes to personal budgets and management of expenses to Indian customers. Also, from an ecosystem point of view, I think there is a greater opportunity for Indian banks to provide embedded lending, embedded finance, other forms of embedded finance to customers out there. Still, there is a lot of dependence on customers coming to the mobile banking app, whereas increasingly we'll see that a lot of transactions are actually originated outside of the mobile banking app in the internet banking.
Right.
Yeah, and if I may add to what Vijay said, Ankur, see, in personal finance management, there are two parts to the personalization puzzle, right? So one is the products and the services, or the supply side, what banks have to offer. The other is also the goals and the aspirations of the individuals at a segment of one, right? So if I were to compare the two sides of it, maybe on tailoring the products, identifying what works for Vijay versus what works for Suchintan, that's something banks are doing a good job. But how much of insight are you generating about understanding where the customer is vis-a-vis his or her goals and then tailoring it. I think that's where magic needs to happen a little more.